All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. Today is Friday, February 20th of 2026. Looking ahead here, we have some League of Legends, tennis, golf, and COD action already underway. Good luck to all of you playing those slates. For the rest of the evening, we have a 7-game NBA slate, so it should be a fun day of DFS. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew, one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS-related questions, get your questions in one of three ways here. First off, send us an email, support@sabersim.com. Second, post it live in the YouTube chat. Third way, post it in the office hours channel in our Discord server. If you're not in our Discord and want to get access to that channel, there is a link in the description of this video. You also get access to our similar channels, individual sport channels, and you get access to the rest of the SaberSim team. Just can't say enough good things about the Discord. But with that said, we do this show Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, and then we do the show on Saturdays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. So you can tune in any one of those days to get your questions answered. All right. With that said, let's get SaberSim pulled up on the screen here. We did have one question come in prior to the show, so we will start there and then just kind of see where things roll. But first question of the day. All right, question says, Andrew, what are the benefits of all contests in one group template versus the other two? Thanks. Yeah, good question. So the most important thing to understand, and we have a bunch of like demo different type of templates that we do all the time, but we're talking about these three up here, right? These are the SaberSim default templates that we provide. Now, you can always do custom ones, which are kind of these examples for various questions that come up on office hours over time. But you can always create a custom one by clicking add new, just so you know. But getting back to these three, I think the easiest way to kind of explain them is like with a demonstration, right? So I'm gonna do an example where I'm playing two 20 max contests, okay? So let's say I am playing two 20 maxes, all right? Well, if I were using one group per contest, I would get two groups, both with 20 lineups. One of the contests would be in group one. One of the contests would be in group two. If I were using direct fill, I would have one group and I would have 40 lineups for the total number of entries across the two 20 max contests. And then both contests would be in this single group. If I were using all contests in one group, I would have one group. I would have both contests in the group, but I would only have 20 lineups. So what all contests in one group does is it uses the max number of entries in a single contest. So because in both 20 maxes, there's only 20 entries. 20 entries is the biggest number. That's what gets assigned here. Direct fill, or it's also called Saber System, potentially on your SaberSim, will add up all of your entries and say, hey, we want to play one lineup in one. We want to play a unique lineup in every entry that we have. So because we're playing 220 maxes, that's 40 entries. So we want 40 lineups. And then one group per contest also gives you a unique lineup per entry, but it splits it out into multiple groups. So that is effectively how they work. Now, it's also important to understand that there is not a right or wrong template. There is not a template that is better or worse. Each of these templates effectively serves a different user. I talk to people who say, hey, I'm playing, 150 max, and then I'm playing some single entries and some 20 maxes. I really just want to build 150 lineups and have those lineups dispersed across all of my contests, all of my other contests, right? For that user, all contests in one group is the right answer. Some users like to say, hey, I always want to play a unique lineup in each entry. Okay, well then, direct fill or one group per contest are better for you. Sometimes maybe we have a user who says, hey, I mostly want unique lineups, but I'm okay if a lineup grades out well in more than one contest, right? If they're like, say I'm playing a 25-cent 20 max and the $1. Well, if I have a lineup that grades out well in both, I'm okay playing it. What that user would want to do is use one group per contest and then go to the settings and then turn off avoid duplicates across lineup groups. So when this is on, the 20 lineups that go into the top group, because lineups get filled from the top down, these 20 lineups effectively get removed from consideration for future groups if it's on. However, if it's off, the 20 lineups used in the top group can still be used again in lower graded groups here. So if a lineup graded out well in both 20 maxes, it could be played if this was off. But if it was on, you would get a unique lineup in each entry. Another consideration is if you are going to use a lot of minimax exposures, the minimax exposures that you set get sent to every group that you have. So if you have a lot of exposures, when the lineups number is lower, it can be harder to reach it. So let's say I was playing a 20 max and a 3 max. Well, all of the exposures are getting sent to the 3 max, and I only have 3 lineups. I might run into a situation where the builder can't meet all of my exposure requests within the 3 lineups. So that would be a good opportunity, in my opinion, to switch to direct fill, where effectively I end up with one group of 23 lineups, and the exposures can be sent to one group that has all 23. So the exposures are getting spread out across all of my lineups together. So I think that's a really good use of the direct fill / Saber Sim template or Saber System template, is if you are doing that. So again, you know, some players use exposure, some players don't. Some players are very aggressive with it. Some players only use like 1 to 3, right? There's not all of those users can be winning players because there's no one right path to victory. You know, there's users who are more hand builder type. There are users who trust the Sims. There are users who have their own, you know, sets of tools that they've built and are probably like more tech savvy. You know, DFS is cool because you can win without needing to be one specific type of player. So I think that, you know, these templates are basically built to serve the vast majority of players that players that we know are in the ecosystem, but the create your own template allows you to take it a step further if something in here isn't exactly meeting what you want it to do. And so don't be afraid to mess around with custom templates as well. All right, good question there. We don't have any more questions at the moment, so why don't we jump into a slate demo? So we got this, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 game slate tonight. I'm going to make 2 adjustments in the My Own column to unlock the Build Lineups button. I'm not going to touch any filters, rules, settings, minimax salary, etc. I'm just going to run these 500 lineups. If you can build 5,000 lineups, I would always build as many lineups as your plan allows. I am only building 500 here just for the sake of time. All right, these lineups are running. Lineups are just about finished. All right, we're getting into the post build. The portfolio diversifier is running to assign us our lineups. Looks like that process just finished, which is great. I'm going to come in here and sort by exposure. And I'm going to make sure that I can see my aggregate metrics. You know, for this example, we're using portfolio. So I'm going to want to look at my Saber score and my average projection. If I was on Portfolio Plus, I'd probably be more interested in projection and average ROI. Me personally, those are ones I like to use. All right, so we come in here And we see some of our top exposures. Looks like there's a lot of value. You know, there's like kind of a few teams I see up here. Memphis, see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Memphis icons. I see 1, 2, 3 Indianapolis or Indiana icons. And I see 1, 2, 3 Pelicans, right? So I think, you know, running a build, kind of getting a sense for which players are popping, which players are showing up the most often. And then you could kind of go a step further where it's like, okay, well, like, why am I seeing so much Memphis? And then you go over to Memphis, you come in here, you scroll down, and I think this is a good opportunity to see the status column. Well, hey, look at all these out players, and then you come in and you look at their salaries: 8,400, 5,700, 5,900, 6,100, 5,300, right? Just a lot of higher salary players that are out means that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for additional minutes, additional usage. You know, look at all the salaries of the players that are in: 5,500, 54, 35, 42, 35. Like, there are 2 players above 5,000, no players above 6,000. That is very rare. So it makes sense that we're seeing a lot of Memphis value here. We go over to the Pacers. A lot of questionable players. You know, this is also another really good thing to pay attention to, right? Like, hey, maybe I come into SaberSim, I go to status, I sort for questionable, and then I look here, right? Okay, hey, there's a lot of questionables on the Pacers. You know, I really want to make sure that since this game is at lock, I would make sure to wait for all of these statuses to go away, for a confirmed lineup to be out for this team before doing my final run, right? It's okay to do runs earlier in the day, but I would for sure want to know, hey, who is actually in, who is actually out, because that's going to impact the value on this team massively. And then if we go over to the Discord, just a reminder that in the NBA lineup alert channel, we do say this, like, hey, you know, so-and-so has been ruled out, and it'll say their team and it'll say their name. So when we get news, right, on Indiana, you know, you might see something like that if players are ruled out rather than ruled in. But these statuses can also be very important, so be aware of those. All right, so we saw the Pacers value, saw Memphis, and then we go over to the Pelicans. Another opportunity here. Okay, less outs, right? But still, let's see, a 3,900, not always the most important. 8,100, right? This is a big one here. And then 6,000. So some value here, not a ton, or at least not as much as some of the other spots on the slate that we saw. I'd say Memphis is like for sure the highest. So that makes sense that one of our highest exposed player in this example plays for Memphis in his 3,500 salary. So I like everything that I'm seeing so far. I think this is okay. This is all kind of QA. This is all kind of checking and making sure everything makes sense, right? Hey, we're getting these high exposures. Why? And then you kind of, when you ask why, you go and look. That's your way of answering that question. And then if it makes sense, like, oh, okay, yeah, this is kind of okay, I'm good with it. If it doesn't make sense, you know, that should be like a red flag kind of going off. Hey, you know, why is this, etc. And maybe that would be like something to make you look a little bit further into why something might be happening. But I can't think of like a specific instance where that would happen. Just things to be aware of. Question here. Ryan said, thanks. Usually use the one group per contest, but had success using all contests with Showdown and trying it on Classic now. Yeah, I think that can make sense on Showdowns. You know, in Showdowns, right, especially if you're kind of MMEing Showdown, I think the difference between like Classic and Showdown is a Classic slate is going to have more winning lineups. Showdowns are going to have less unique winning lineups because in Showdown, you know, more often than not, you're going to need the optimal lineup to win in Showdown. So it's really, say there's, you know, one optimal lineup. Well, that optimal lineup won the flagship. It won the $3.20 max. It also won the $1.20 max. and it won the quarter jukebox, right? You have like this one winning lineup across multiple contests. In Classic, that's generally not the case, right? One lineup wins this contest, a different lineup wins this contest. Do they share players? Yeah, absolutely. But the lineups are still unique. In Showdown, that's not so much the case. So if you're using all contests in one group in Showdown, what you're doing is you're effectively playing lineups multiple times, and you're hoping that that lineup wins, and then you win multiple contests. So I could definitely see why you would have more success using all contests in one group, because if you hit that optimal lineup, now you're going to ship multiple contests. So definitely understand that logic. Jared said, good afternoon, Andrew. How do you get the 300 plus for NBA? I noticed using the Sims, they don't usually get close to the winning lineup. So I think that, it's also important to understand, right? We have our average projection aggregate metric here, right? Like, hey, our average projection is 284 on this slate, right? Remember that this is the average, right? To see like the lineup percentiles, to kind of focus on the lineup upside. You might want to do something where you go over to Uniques 1 and then you use the percentiles, right? So I go over to the rank by, and then I'm going to switch this from old Saber score to percentile. And let's say I go to 99th percentile, right? Well, what does this mean? Well, this is what the lineup scores 1% of the time. It's its highest 1% outcome. So here, the 99th percentile of this top lineup is 356.76 points. What SaberSim is saying, hey, 1% of the time this lineup scores 356 points. If you hover here, you can actually see all the other percentiles. The 95th percentile would be the score the lineup gets 5% of the time. Hey, in our Sims, this lineup scores 332 points 5% of the time. It scores 315 points 15% of the time, right? So imagine you're playing a 150 max contest. Well, a 99th lineup percentile happens 1% of the time. That means you should expect about 1 to 1.5, so 1 to 2 lineups really to hit their 99th percentile playing a 150 max. So if you want to optimize for upside and upside alone, I would consider using 99th percentile sorting here via the Uniques 1 diversity. Snowman said, good day. Baseball is back. Yeah, spring training is upon us here. And the opening day is, I believe, March 26th. So a little over a month away here, but going to come up very, very fast. Robert said, I probably asked this before. Does it make more sense to use one group per contest if you don't make a lot of min and max exposure changes? Yeah, I definitely think so. I would say that if using direct fill makes more sense when making a lot of exposure changes, then using one group per contest should make sense when using less exposure adjustments, right? So if you're making a lot of exposures, I'll always say, hey, go from one group per contest to direct fill / Saber system. So I think the inverse should be true, where if you are not making a lot of adjustments, then you should feel more comfortable using one group per contest, definitely. All right, we were in the middle of this slate demo when a couple questions rolled in, which is always great. So we were verifying kind of some of our top exposures, some of the top values, some of our top leverages. Everything kind of checked out there. We did switch over to Uniques 1, 99th percentile here. I'm going to switch back to portfolio and let this rediversify. So at this point, I think this is, we verified everything. Everything looks fine. I think this is, the point where you make your, you kind of put your own, like flavor on this, right? If you want, now is the time to set some minimax exposures, maybe manage some risk. Hey, I've never even heard of Javon Small. I don't really know if I want to be 91% exposed to him, even though he looks like a really good value play. maybe I want to lower this to 60% max exposure, right? Risk management decision, you are still over the field. If he comes in at 41%, you're about 1.5x the field. So you're still listening to SaberSim, but you're just bringing that leverage down to a level that is a little bit more comfortable for you, right? Okay, great. I apply this change. The diversifier reruns here. And then now my exposures change, right? And I come in here and I look at this, and now I have let SaberSim kind of figure out what is the new best exposure for this player. We put a 60% cap. He went to 56.5%, still over the field. His leverage is a lot more in line with a lot of our other leverages here. And then now our top leverage is a 10,500 salary player who is the actual highest projected player on the slate. And maybe I'm a little bit more comfortable with that because I know this player is high projection, high salary. I actually know this player's name. I've seen them before. And now I've managed some risk, and I'm a lot more happy with these lineups. So at this point, I would be ready to save these and upload them to my contests. All right, Jared said, I noticed you said you don't recommend using the aggregate rule. So before building lineups, for example, creating a rule of at least 330 for the 99th percentile, could that help or not? Yes. So it cannot help in this instance. It has to do with something that's like a little bit tricky. So the way we come up with the lineup percentiles, going back to the percentile conversation here, is we build the lineups and then we go back into the sims that we use to create these lineups. And then we say, hey, you know, this group of players as a whole, how many points did they score? So like we click on a player, right? I'm going to click on a player here in a second. And then we see their graph. What we do is after the lineup is created, we basically create a graph for the lineup. We figure out, hey, what is this lineups distribution? That can only happen after the lineup is built. A rule goes into the lineup building process. So a rule is part of the lineup creation. It's implemented before the lineup is finished. So because rules happen in the lineup creation, a 99th percent aggregate rule has no choice but to use the player percentiles. So if I set something that says, hey, my 99th must be above X. Well, what it's doing is it's just adding up the individual player percentiles. The lineup percentiles are not doing that. You know, this 356 is not Small's 99th plus Nepel's 99th plus Brown's 99th, etc., right? Because what that would be is a 1% outcome for Small times a 1% outcome for Nepel times a 1% outcome for Brown. The odds of that happening are super, super small. But when we look at the lineup as a whole, well, now the lineup's 99th percentile, hey, this player could have done really good. This player could have done kind of good. This player could have had like an average outcome. You get like a mix of the player percentiles while figuring out how the lineup does all together. So the problem with the rule is that the aggregate rule would use player percentiles, but we're focusing on lineup percentiles. So there's a little bit of, you know, you're comparing apples to oranges a little bit in that example. So they just kind of don't work together, unfortunately. So I like the lineup percentile option. You could always filter here, right? Hey, I want to do a filter now. If I come in and I do a percentile filter for, say, 99th, say greater than, and I'll say 95th, right? 95th greater than, and I don't know, I'm going to make up a number, 300. Okay, so that removed a couple lineups, right? So, hey, 95th percentile above 300, remove 16 lineups here, right? And then I could like name this so I can use it again in the future. I think we said 95th. Yeah, 95th percentile. And boom, that's done. So you could consider filtering. I think that's totally okay if you want to kind of zone in on a subset of lineups from your pool, cutting out some of the lineups you don't want to consider or kind of don't match your plan. I think this is an okay route to explore as well. All right. Looking here in Discord and YouTube chat, looks like we are all caught up, knocked out a slate demo as well. I will be back tomorrow, 12:30 p.m. Eastern here, so quick turnaround on the show. Appreciate you guys all tuning in. Until tomorrow, everyone, take care. Good luck. Thanks. Bye.